son is on the cover of this particular book, and I would like for him to grow up to be a man. Like many of you already told me, that you have sons and male students as well. Now there's two parts of the conspiracy, Volume 1, and this is Volume 2. In Volume 1, we raised 4 questions. First question is, when did the conspiracy start? Who is against black boys? Why is there a conspiracy against them? And what exactly is the conspiracy? That's in Volume 1. In Volume 2, we look at the relationships between mothers and their sons. That must be studied. We also must look at female teachers and black male students. That must also be studied. We must look at some case studies. In other words, many of us are doing a very good job developing black boys to be men. What is it that some of us are doing that others are not doing? And then last but not least, a program called the Rites of Passage into Manhood. When did it start? And as we begin to look at that, I want to also share with you why we call it a conspiracy to destroy black boys. You see, contrary to belief at birth, there are more black boys born in the world than there are girls. It's close, but it's 1.03 black boys born in the world to 1.0 black girls. Hear me clearly. At birth, black boys outnumber black girls 1.03 to 1.0. A brief 18 years later, it is now 1.0 available, and that's a key word, available black men, to 1.8 available black women. Almost 2 adult women for every 1 adult man. Now the only question that should be going through your minds right now is what happened? We keep raising the wrong question. Look around the room and tell, you know, where are they? If they are not available to black women, where are they?
Dr. Juwanza Kunjufu opens his lecture, The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, with 4 piercing questions. When did the conspiracy begin? Who was against black boys? Why does such a conspiracy exist? And what exactly is this conspiracy? These questions set the stage for his exploration of how social, educational, and political systems collectively failed black boys. Kunjufu emphasizes that we must examine the intimate relationships black boys have with their mothers and their primary female teachers, because these relationships shape early development. He challenges the audience to understand why some sectors of black America, such as 2-parent households, communities with strong male role models, and culturally supportive environments, successfully raise confident black men, while others consistently struggle. Kunjufu highlights a troubling demographic reality. More black boys are born than black girls, yet by age 18, more black girls are alive than black boys. He explains that this imbalance results from the elimination, incarceration, untreated health concerns, institutionalization, self-deletion, and pressures that push some into lifestyles disconnected from healthy community formation. Beyond that, interracial marriage and disenfranchisement further reduce the number of black men available to black women. Kunjufu argues that these outcomes are not accidental. They reflect structural realities designed to marginalize and destabilize the black male population.
In jail, there are 329,000 brothers in prison right now. 1 of every 4 brothers will go to prison. Where else? Or death. There's numerous ways that we die. There's homicide, suicide, drugs, war, high blood pressure, and the leading killer among black men, lung cancer. Our love for cigarettes, especially cool. Smoke them all day long, die the exact same way. Cool. Where else? We have prison, death. What else to make us unavailable to black women? Yes, homosexuality. As you said earlier, 1 of every 9 men in this country are homosexual. Where else? Yes.
Hospitalized, institutionalized.
Okay, so institutionalization, and there's not only in terms of hospitals, but also mental institutions, and of course, when they get released, many times being homeless. There's still one other large popular area. Thimby?
They marry white women.
Okay, interracial marriages. Now I want to pause there for a moment, because you would think if anybody is going to marry outside the race, it would be black women. You got 2 black women for every 1 black man. Thousand are brothers. That means 48,000 sisters. It's almost a 2-to-1 ratio of black men to black women marrying outside the race. But remember, as you said in the earlier workshop, if the definition of beauty is light skin, long hair, and blue eyes, why stop with Renee, the light-skinned sister? Why not get you the real thing? There's some serious problems here. And then black men tell me, I can't find a black woman to understand me. You mean out of 20 million black women, you can't find one to understand you? You don't need a white woman, you need a psychiatrist. But that's another workshop on relationships. But I just want to share with you, we got some very serious problems. But to tease this audience, black women are tired of being by themselves. And in the earlier issue of Essence magazine, the article said, guess who's coming to dinner now? Black women are tired of being by themselves. In other words, brothers, you can't have it both ways. You can't have two black women to choose from and still marry a white woman. You can't have it both ways. Black women are tired of being by themselves. Now, that's with regards to the stats, why we wrote the book, because we saw the shortage of black men. But what we want to begin to find out is, when did it start? You see, it's called the fourth grade syndrome. Studies show that black boys may be the best students in the country up until the fourth grade. So we wanted to find out what your son, a male student, was doing at the beginning of the third grade, then at the end of the seventh grade, and then measure the progress. Let me give you 3 examples. We had a little boy 5 years ago on the Alva reading test score at the 98th percentile in the country. In other words, a walking genius. That means only 2% male, female, white, or black had a higher score than he at the beginning of the third grade. At the end of 7th grade, the same boy now drops down to the 35th percentile. Engineer potential here, pimp or pusher now, scores should have improved 5 years, instead they only improved 1.3. 2 more examples. We had a little boy at the 92nd percentile. He dropped down to the 24th percentile, and his scores only improved 2.1. But let me give you the average example. We had a little boy at the 63rd percentile. He dropped down to the 4th percentile, and his scores didn't improve a year, a month, a week, not even a day. There are 3 critical stages in black boys' development: infancy to 9, 9 to 13, and 13 to 18. You see, it's easy to see the negative behavior here when he's already dropped out, laid up on some street corner lacking direction. It's more difficult to see it around 9 years of age, when they begin to sit further in the back of the class, when they begin to ask less questions, when their ball becomes more important than their book, when they begin to cheat on their tests. We appeal to you to turn your sons and male students on early. Teach them how to read early. Teach them the beauty of being black and believing in God early. But many of us have waited, and we have waited almost too late to develop black boys to be men. You know what I'm getting at. America spends $2,300 on Head Start. They spend $38,000 on prison. If Reagan wanted to balance the budget, I can show you save about $36,000 per person. It's much easier to educate than it is to incarcerate. Now you raise the questions. How long do you stay in Head Start? Year? 2 years is the most? How long do you stay in prison? The rest of your life? Question number 1. Question number 2. Does Head Start work? A 19-year study documents that Head Start works. But in prison, 85% of the inmates that get released go right back in. But as Jesse Jackson says, we have 2 choices. We can either send me to Penn State or to State Penn. It's your choice. We have got to find ways to intervene. Now we have a whole workshop just on the 4th grade syndrome. I now want to ask you, what are some of the reasons you feel to explain why black students, especially black boys, were doing so well K through 3, and now scores declining in the intermediate and upper grades? What explains it? Yes?
I think the learning style changes abruptly in 4th grade from what might have been more right brain activities in the primary grades into all of a sudden all left brain activities.
Okay, so a change in learning styles or methodology from the teacher, from a holistic learning style to a left brain. Okay, very good. Any others? Yes?
I think that there's a lot of rejection on the part of the female teachers in the classroom.
And the rejection increases with the upper grades? Why do you think it increases?
Because of the students, perhaps his natural makeup, hyperactivity and that sort of thing.
And that may be increasing? Well, it may be increasing because we're now expecting them to stay in school or stay in a chair even longer. Okay. Any others that contribute to this 4th grade syndrome? We have a change in learning style. We have the teacher's outlook on the student. What else? Yes?
The student becomes more culturally aware and differs significantly from the teacher often.
Okay. So the child's now becoming more aware of their culture and racial identity. Okay. Very good. Any others? The major reason you have not given yet, and that's why this problem is still with us. Terry? First name is?
Richard.
I'm sorry, Richard.
Well, the peer group starts to form and become stronger about the peer
And
group.
that's unfortunate, Richard, that you said that, because as the age increases, the peer pressure is on the increase, while parental involvement is on a decrease. I don't know who told parents when your child gets older, they need less of your time rather than more. When I speak to Head Start parents, 80% of them are there. Elementary school, 30%. High school, almost a joke. We have to work on that. That's another workshop, too, on parenting all the way through, not just in those quote-unquote tender years. But the major reason, it's not on the board yet. Still looking for it. Yes. Go in.
I think, too, that young boys, and particularly young black boys, in the primary grades, they have many mother figures, and they have very few men figures, and particularly black male figures. And I think it makes a big difference come grade 4.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's the major reason. And let me now get my first position. I sincerely believe to get some white ball players, I'm going to do that. If it means going extra step to get some black students in debate and science fairs, I'm going to do that. Because they are committed to having students involved in both academic and athletic competition. Because it sharpens your skills. And we are concerned about that. In other words, let's move away from the varsity approach to academics, where you only have the top 1 or 2 students representing the school. We believe in the intramural approach. We believe in a class of 30 students, let's have 6 teams of 5 players. Let's have everyone involved in athletics. Let's have everyone involved in academics, because competition sharpens the skills. But you know what's sad? Even schools give more glory to their ball players than their scholars. In other words, for the basketball winners, they get these big trophies. For the debate team, they get these little certificates. Where the pep rallies for the honor roll. In other words, we give them to the basketball team, but why not to the academic scholars and achievers as well? In other words, we are illustrating where our priorities are. We want to change that priority. We've got to find ways to infiltrate the peer group, to get them all involved in both academic and athletic competition. Some other ideas on this. The University of Michigan did a study when you and I were growing up, and they wanted to find out what was the major influence on children. The University of Michigan reports in 1950 that the greatest influence on children was the home, followed closely by school, then church, then peer group, then television. Now, Gwen, you probably call these the good old days. Home, school, church, peer group, and television. Hold Your Brothers will give you 1980, 1985. Home is still number 1, but the streets, the peer group, that's what we're talking about, is now in the number 2 position. Television and video games are number 3, predicting number 1 sometime this year. School has now dropped down to the 4th position, and I'm sorry you can't find church anywhere on a map. A whole lot has happened in 30 years. I want to again pause and look at the peer group, your greatest source of competition. In other words, the power of the peer group is because they look like each other. You will always emulate those people that look like you. What am I getting at? To connect it to the classroom? I became a writer to make sure I'm not misquoted. A white teacher can teach a black child math because expectations transcend race. Don't misquote me. I'm in no way saying that a white teacher cannot teach a black child because expectations transcend race. But a white teacher cannot teach a black child how to be black. In other words, in order to be a black engineer, you need to see a black engineer. The power of the peer group, they look like each other. In other words, when I ask black boys across the country to name me 5 black male entertainers, they don't have a problem. Name 5 black male athletes, they don't have a problem. But when I ask them to name me 5 black men with college degrees, they have all kinds of problems. In other words, if we cannot increase black staff at your school, then what I recommend you do, like what St. Louis is doing, is have a central role model program. So we begin to bring in black role models on a regular basis. So we don't want to take the white teacher out of class, but if he or she has to stay there, then we want every week or at least once a month role models coming in so our youth can see black achievers. And we need to centralize that kind of program. The power of the peer group, they look like each other. Another secret about the peer group. You see, in most classes, let me do it this way, I'll use another sheet. In most classrooms, you have 30 students and you have 1 teacher. And it's almost 30 against 1. That's how it's phrased. 30 against 1. You always lose with odds like that. We have got to find ways to get the odds in our favor. In other words, I recommend that a teacher identify who the leaders are. You see, we must get them to buy into our value system. We must find ways to infiltrate the peer group, to inculcate our value system into theirs. And that first of all means identifying who the leaders are. And let me give you a secret. The leaders don't walk around saying, with a t-shirt, I'm the leader, I'm running the class. They do it with body language. They do it with eye contact. And so the first step is, do you know how to identify the leader? And then once you do, either before school, after school, or some break, pull him or her over to the side and try to inculcate your value system into theirs. Then they will begin to proselytize the other parts of the peer group. We have got to get more of the peer group buying into our value system. You see, the peer group does not have to be negative. It can also be positive. The question is, which value system they're going to promote. We have to begin to look at those kinds of issues. And so we recommend these kinds of strategies for the peer group. We recommend that, first of all, we begin to put more priorities on our academic achievement over athletic achievement. We also recommend moving away from the varsity approach to the intramural approach. We recommend that you identify who the leaders are. We recommend we bring in more role models to our program, provide pep rallies for academic achievement. But my major concern here is that schools are more than academic institutions. They are also social institutions. It is sad to say this, but you could have been doing your job. Parents could have been doing their job. And it all goes for naught because the black and Hispanic peer group are reinforcing what kind of gym shoes they wear, what kind of clothes they wear, how well they fight or dance, and not academic achievement. This is not theoretical. I was in honors classes when I was in high school, and I was so influenced by my peer group, I flunked the whole marking period intentionally, trying to get kicked out. Had it not been for my father, who then kicked my butt, I'd had some very serious problems realizing his size 11 of my rear end was more important than my peer group. But let me give you a secret. When you want to reinforce academic achievement, especially for black boys, it becomes suicidal if he's not also involved in the martial arts. In other words, I was still in honors programs, but I was allowed to run track and also martial arts because my peer group did not respect my honors achievement, but they did respect my martial arts belt. We have to begin to look at those kinds of areas. Before we move on to the next area with regards to parents, any comments about the peer group? Its tremendous impact on academic achievement. Any comments or questions? You got 30 seconds, so I'm moving on. Yes, sir. First name?
Michael.
Michael.
What can teachers do to influence this in the context of a classroom situation?
Well, I tried to mention a couple, Michael. One, I wanted you to identify who the leaders were and begin to sell your value system to them. Secondly, I wanted you to bring more role models into your classroom so they can see blacks in high professions that have advanced themselves. Three, I wanted you to provide, or with your school, to provide more academic achievement in terms of glorifying that, in terms of pep rallies and trophies and the like. Any other comments about the peer group? A major source of competition. Another area, parents. We're very concerned about the role of parents with regards to our schools. And one of our concerns, there's a distinction between involvement and support. These two words are not the same, but they're used synonymously. We want to begin to look at that. Parental involvement and parental support. Parental involvement is attending a PTA meeting, baking baked goods for a bake sale, selling raffle tickets for a raffle sale. Look, if I never attend your PTA meeting, but I monitor my child's peer group, I monitor television, we go to the library on a regular basis, that's support. Now I know you want them both, but between the two of them, I sincerely believe support is a lot more significant than parental involvement. But I do agree, after we get the support, we also need the involvement. So I've begun to look at Head Start, to begin to look at Chapter 1, to look at some effective principles in terms of what they do with our students. And I found there are certain things that they do. First of all, we have to find ways to market our programs. I often ask principals, how many parents are going to be there tonight when I speak to them? Well, I don't know. I sent out 1,000 flyers. That tells me right there, they don't know a thing about black culture. Because the rumor is, if you want to make sure black folks don't find out about it, put it in the book. In other words, we are not a written people primarily. It's the oral tradition. If you want me there, call me up. So 1,000 flyers may only generate 10 parents. But a personal invitation, a personal phone call, that's what Head Start does. That's what Chapter 1 does. So they use, first of all, the oral tradition. They find ways to communicate in other ways besides a printed flyer. And then secondly, who determined what the workshop should be about? You see, most schools teach parents the same way they teach children. Well, we decide for them what the workshop should be about. That's a mistake. In other words, if you know that parents are younger these days, are less mature, are changing demographics, then before giving them a workshop on their child's development, why don't you give them one on their own development, on relationships? If you want black men to be there, give them a workshop on a conspiracy to destroy black boys, or how to find a job. In other words, one school district in this country, Cleveland Heights, has a 50-50 black-white school population, but a 97% white PTA. They wanted to bring me in to get more parents to come out, but they were concerned with the title. The title says developing positive self-images and discipline in black children. If they kept the word black in, the white parents may not show up. But if they don't keep the word black in, the black parents may never attend. They keep the word black in. and broke a record that night. And black parents said it was the first you finally gave me a workshop about me. Now, of course, let me be honest. There were very few white parents there, only about 43 of them, about 400 black parents. So the next day, at PTA Council, we're still working on how to get both groups together. But we at least solved the objective. We got more black parents to come out. In other words, what I'm really getting at with regards to this is that black parents have told me, Juwanza, I know I need to be there. But if all we're going to discuss is last month's minutes, some budgetary changes, and a couple of personnel changes with a boring speaker, I'm simply not going to be there. I gave you a clue, a boring speaker. Remember in the oral tradition, the strength of the black church, a charismatic speaker. If you want black parents to be there, not only have an interesting topic, but also the speaker has to be one that's able to keep their attention. It's unfortunate we have to do this, but we do. And we have to find ways to continue those kind of marketing efforts. And then, of course, there's always those we always can depend on. For example, providing food. It works almost every time. Providing child care. It works the majority of the time. Providing transportation. If your meeting is at night in a low-income, crime-ridden area, you may need to provide security. And then the one that works every time, have the children perform. In other words, parents, black, white, and Hispanic, and Asian, they all love to see their children perform. You know how many programs I've been on where the choir, not the class choir, the school choir sang before them. And then the principal, oh, and by the way, we're bringing Dr. Juwanza in for a 30-minute parent workshop. And to make sure you stay, and then the choir will then come back with their clothing selections. It works every time. We have to find those kinds of ways. And why do we have to do that? We have to do that because before 1954, when we had teachers who lived on the same block, who went to the same church. See, black parents have always trusted the teachers. They've always felt that you were the primary educator. I'm now telling parents, unfortunately, you may not be the primary educator. You may not know what's best for their children.
A major focus of this lecture is what Dr. Kunjufu famously calls fourth grade syndrome. He notes that black boys typically perform academically at or above grade level until approximately the fourth grade. After that, their performance declines sharply. According to Kunjufu, this drop is not the fault of the children, but the result of the educational, communal, and family systems not designed to empower black boys intellectually. He points out the hypocrisy of a penal system that refuses to invest in rehabilitation, despite overwhelming evidence that education drastically reduces recidivism, because the system profits from a steady influx of uneducated and unsupported young black men. Kunjufu then asks his audience to examine the reasons behind fourth grade syndrome. Around the fourth grade, black boys experience a shift in learning styles. Teachers' perceptions and expectations of them become more negative, and they begin to recognize their racial identity within a society that views black maleness as suspicion. Peer pressure intensifies, while parental involvement, especially from parents of boys, declines dramatically due to the mistaken belief that boys require less emotional connection as they age. All of these forces collide at a critical stage of identity formation, making academic disengagement almost inevitable without strong counter-interventions. Ultimately, Dr. Kunjufu argues that the single greatest reason for the decline in black boys' academic achievement is the lack of positive black male examples. He insists that black boys need to see black men to become black men, yet many of the black male models visible in the community are negative or superficial, emphasizing athletics over academics. Kunjufu warns that when communities value physical prowess more than intellectual development, boys are not inspired to excel academically or prepare for adulthood in ways that strengthen the black community. Without intentional investment in positive, culturally grounded black male mentorship, he warns, the cycle of academic decline, incarceration, and community destabilization will continue.